I've got the handle put on this axe. It's cured up. It's had about 18 hours, so it's good and solid. Directions say that it sets up in 5 minutes. It's considered dry in about an hour, but it takes more than 24 before it's actually fully cured. So before I do a lot with it, I'm going to give it another day. It's got 18 hours on it now. I'm going to give it another full day to cure up before I do much more of anything. But I can still work on the outside. I cleaned the excess epoxy off the axe, and went over it 2 or 3 times with 220 in the DA. So now it's going to be the first coating, first application of the bluing. And the first coating is always looks rough. And it brings out all of the scratches, and it brings out all of the if there was a little bit of surface rust, you're going to see it right away too. There's some red right around in here. But once the first coat is on, and you let it dry, I got some 4/0 steel wool. Once it's dry, the surface will have a rough, blotchy appearance to it, and then you go over it with the 4/0, smooth it down, and you take a look at what the surface looks like, and from there you add more layers. It's just like varnish in one sense, where you put an initial cover coat down, go over it with some real fine sandpaper, and then you add a couple of more layers to it. And you can tell by some of the drips and drops that I've left on here that it takes a few minutes for it to really soak down and change the color. But this is doing pretty good. The color of this rag is changing quite a bit because it's pulling up any surface rust that happened to be on the metal, and it's putting it on the rag. The coats after this, the rag will stay clean. It's starting to, I'm seeing some blues and reds. But I've learned not to make any quick judgments as what it's going to look like at the end until you've let it sit and soak up for maybe a half an hour, and then come back and put more layers on. But I've got the sheath for it here. Got an identical one here. They came in, and this is one for a boy's axe size, but you know, 1 3/4 pound size head. This pad's about used up. And you would think you could just soak this in and it would be good, since it's actually an acid, but I've found that you really need to rub it into the surface. I had plans, initial thoughts anyway, wouldn't really call them plans, to sand this smooth enough to consider it to be polished, but I traded for this axe head, and it was found laying outdoors for several years. It had laid outdoors for several years. There was what was left of a wooden handle rusted off, and when I got it, it was covered with rust. So I'm calling this a pretty good finish for an axe that had been, wasn't exactly buried, but it was outside in the weather for several years, long enough for an oak handle to rot through. Okay, then this is what you get on the other side once it starts to dry. You got all the white marks from the rag are in there. Give it another layer and let it soak in. And some of there was one drop that hit this first of all right here, and it left a really dark drop, and that's evening out now. So this process, it just takes some time. Once this one dries out, I'll hit it with some steel wool and then I'll go over it with some alcohol, and then I'll continue along and add layers of bluing. But this is a good start. Yeah, I'm happy with that for a beginning. I'll let this sit for about an hour, then I'll clean it up with some water and then some steel wool, and then I'll go through and put another layer on. And this is that other axe head. I have yet. It still has some marks over here from. It looks like a buffer wheel shattered on it. So I'll hit it with some 220, and then after that I'll hit it with some 1000, and this one will be ready for a handle too. Alright, we'll cut this off before it gets way too long.